Welcome to the inaugural episode of A Common America, the podcast. We want to thank everyone for joining us on on this journey. It's our first time doing podcasts together, and we're really excited to join us today. GM?
Yeah, this is exciting. I've been looking forward to doing this, and it'll be good to learn about what our audience thinks and cares about, and for us to share a little bit about what we're working on and how we are looking to make a change. Why don't we talk a little bit about why we're doing this, what we're focused on?
We've spent a lot of time having conversations about the state of politics in America, and usually that discussion results in people just kind of shrugging their shoulders and walking away. And so we had those conversations for years now. We've known each other a long time, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But we realized that we were frustrated with kind of what's been going on in DC for the last couple of years. And we just kind of got to a point where we just couldn't watch it occur anymore without doing something. And so we spent a lot of time this last year or so discussing what the possibilities are. And we decided to launch this entity called the Common America. We are a super PAC. We're actually trying to make things better in America. We are trying to bring bipartisanship and communication empathy back to government and to get legislation passed in the House and the Senate and signed by the president that will actually help most Americans on topics that most Americans agree on.
So today's episode is going to focus more on who we are as a common America. And like Mark said, we think that bipartisanship is the key to success in politics and ultimately in fixing our broken political system. Today, so much of our political discourse is people yelling into the wind their point of view and not listening to each other, not listening to the other perspectives at the table. Ultimately, to make law in our form of government, it takes listening to both sides, and it takes compromise in order to make law. You can have press conferences all the time that focus on your point of view, but in order to govern, we have to listen to each other. Senator Langford was just talking about that last week. It absolutely is true that you have to listen, you have to compromise, and it takes a majority to move forward. And that's what's not occurring in our government today. I think that the next thing is, why are we doing this? Why are we stepping forward to do this? Mark, talk a little bit about, for you, why now? Why is now the time for you?
I'm in Montana and the snow's coming down again outside, but I grew up here in this pretty conservative town. And it used to be a community of, I would say people were empathetic. And it didn't matter where you came from, if you were a farmer out of town or someone in town, or if you were new to town, it didn't matter. If you needed help, people would help you out. And they would talk to you and they would understand or try to understand how you felt about things. And it was, things were different back then. But I really, when I start thinking about what's going on today, I really wish we were back to those times when I was young and people cared for each other. I know it sounds like maybe that won't be realistic, but I think that's something that we can get back to. And we know tens of millions of Americans who want to get back to that. They just don't know how. So for me, if the focus is empathy and what's unique about being an American and supporting one another, even if we have differences, that's why I wanted to start down this path with this super PAC, A Common America, because we look at Pew Research, we look at other research out there about the major issues facing the country, and the reality is that most Americans agree on which ones we need to solve. They don't agree on how they need to solve them necessarily, but they want Congress to take action and to fix these issues. And right now, with the gridlock that's going on in Washington, they won't. So why? So part of the issue is that these disenfranchised voters, this moderate bloc that we talk about, which we think is huge, they haven't had a voice. And so I'm one of those moderate people. And I used to be a Republican, now I'm independent. And we decided here, I wanted to make it about non-politicians taking action. I wanted to make it a grassroots organization. I wanted to do something so that other people feel empowered to do similar things. It doesn't have to be with us. It could be with any other org, or to get out and talk to people across the street. It could be donating to our cause or another, but to empower people to make the changes in government required. That's kind of why I decided to start this about 6 months ago. How about you, GM?
Yeah, a lot of what you said resonates with me. I grew up in the middle part of the country. My grandmother was really involved in the civic operation of our government. I wouldn't say that she was a political person, but she was civically engaged. She worked in the county courthouse. She participated as an election worker for nearly every election that was held. She encouraged me to get involved. The first election where I was eligible to vote, she helped me serve as an election official in our local precinct. To see the electoral process up close is an experience that I'll never forget. I've not been a political person throughout my life either. But having that experience in the process, it's a good memory in my mind. It's a good memory of being civically engaged and feeling like we all have a part to play in this process of making laws. Ultimately, it's the elected officials that have to do the heavy lifting of crafting a bill, getting support for that bill across the aisle, getting enough support so that that bill can pass. And what encouraged me to take this action now, join Mark and create A Common America, is that I was seeing that we were receding to our political corners and having one-sided arguing matches or discussions publicly about why our perspective is 100% right and the opposition is completely wrong. Reflecting back on the point you made about Pew Research and how the majority of Americans do agree on the key issues, they even agree on big portions of the solution. And what we need to do is break these problems down as opposed to making them it's this entire solution or nothing. Really deconstruct the solutions to the point where the 80% of the solution that we do agree on can be implemented as law, so that each of these big issues, whether it's immigration or whether it's waste in government or whether it's common sense gun control, we can move these issues forward and we can achieve that progress over time. I don't have the 100% solution to any of those issues, but I do believe that the large majority of the country does agree on enough of a solution to each of those problems that we could be in a better place than we are today. So for me, that's my why now.
Yeah, I think if you think about why now, just what's going on this week in DC. I read today Representative Mark Green, who's a Republican from Tennessee, the day after he had Mayorkas impeached in the House, he said he's retiring because this place is broken. So interesting comment from an interesting individual. We talk about extremism in politics, but even some of the more extreme people, especially in the House, feel like the system is broken and something needs to be done. Yet even that gentleman, the representative for Tennessee, worked to impeach a very controversial situation, worked to impeach Mayorkas yesterday. So it's pretty interesting how broken it really is.
Why don't we talk a little bit about how A Common America is different than some of the other political organizations that are out there? What are we trying to do? What are we not trying to do, in your view, Mark?
Yeah, I think we have similar goals to some of the other organizations out there. So there are groups out there that are putting country first, for example. There's some that are going against anti-extremism in politics. The unique thing about A Common America is that we're combining two different pushes that we're doing in parallel. One is education. So we're looking at educating the moderate bloc, which, as we said, is a very large group of voters in the U.S. We're educating them on being empathetic and taking action to, have an impact in government the way it should be, not the way it has been. And we're encouraging some of these people to cross the street, as I said before, cross the street and talk, have an open conversation, respectful, with empathy for people that have different political beliefs than they do, just to try to start the conversation. And I think as more and more Americans have the conversation across the street or across the aisle, as we say, I think they'll start to understand why we want to focus on our similarities or things we have in common versus just the differences, because the differences are small. Again, on some of these policies, some people think that they look for the one thing that's to be implemented that's not the same as what the other party wants. But 80% GM, as you said, probably most people agree on. So First is education. We're going to educate voters on candidates that are coming up that actually have adopted a common America approach, which means we're going to be empathetic. We'll be civil with each other across the aisle. We will focus on 80% solutions to get legislation passed, because right now nothing's happening. The other side of it is we're going to take action in elections. So this is something a lot of other organizations aren't doing. We're actually going to try to take about 80% of our raised funds and apply them directly towards federal elections, starting in the House in 2024. So that's kind of why we're different. We're doing both of those things. A lot of organizations do one or the other. They support a candidate or a party. And then lastly, I would say for why we're different, I think that we're starting from scratch. We're not a group that has a $50 million budget and go off and start doing this. Usually those come from either the Republican or the Democratic side. We're actually starting from scratch. We're employing a grassroots approach. GM and I are actually from tech. We're not from politics. And I think that's really important. When we talk about our interest in this, it's not self-serving. Well, as an American, I guess it is, because we're trying to actually make things better. But we come from technology. We're treating this as any other entity. We kind of grow from the start and grow as fast as we can and bring people in with the same empathy and respect that we would want Americans to treat each other with. And I think that doing that, starting from a grassroots kind of a position, gives us more credibility as we grow. We're going to want to solicit feedback from all of you that are listening. What things you want to see different in the country? What things do you want to see change? What legislation are you really focused on? We want you to participate. We want you to provide input. We want to try to change our policy wherever needed to actually kind of amplify that moderate voice to make changes in America.
Yeah, I think one of the key reasons that we're different is we don't come from the political establishment. We are not politicians. We really just want to achieve a place where everyday common Americans come together and engage in the dialogue, engage in a discussion, both to share their perspective for those of us that feel as though we haven't had a voice in that political dialogue, because the only views that we're hearing in the news are the extreme perspectives. We want to give a voice to those that have been sitting on the sidelines so that they feel as though they can be heard as well, that their voice matters in solving these political issues that we have. We believe that by the two of us coming from outside of the political establishment to establish this place in the political discourse, it will encourage others. We hope to encourage others to come and participate as well. It can start with little activities in your daily life, talking to your neighbor, talking to the person 2 or 3 homes down the street that you may never really run into or go out of your way to engage. Try to understand their life, their perspective, their take on some of these issues. If you can solve some of these issues in your neighborhood and in your town, that's the same approach that will eventually work in the national stage. And so we want to encourage people to engage in this discussion so that we can encourage our leaders to engage in this discussion when it comes to making law.
I want to emphasize that discussion. We really encourage a respectful dialogue. We do see some of the dialogue that goes on that's full of hate, and that's not what we're encouraging people to do. We're an organization about empathy and civility, so we can respect difference of opinion, but when you engage people that might be different, doesn't have your same outlook or your perspective on the world, politics, whatever it might be, try to come halfway and try to understand why they feel the way they do, why they want to vote independent, Republican, Democrat, what the topic is, who the candidate is, and just try to understand it. You're not trying to change their mind. That's what we want to get away from, is that people today get into these feuds with each other. And as Americans, we have to get away from that. We have to get to a point where we understand we're different, but we understand we want some of the same things, many of the same things. And so that discourse should be one of emotion, of course, because these are near and dear to our hearts, these topics, but one of respect, mutual respect. And if you enter the conversation with that feeling that I want to go find out more about my neighbor or the person at the school board meeting who disagrees with me, and you approach it as, hey, I really want to understand your perspective a little bit more. I don't agree with you necessarily, but I respect that we have a distance in opinion, And I want to understand a little bit better. I want to understand why you feel this way. And I'd like to share, if you're interested, the way I feel. And just so we can walk away actually getting to know each other, you can understand what those differences might be, even if they're minor. I really want to encourage that. It's part of that discourse that has to happen.
So talking about discourse, why don't you talk about the petition that we've put forward, where we are trying to connect these local activities to engage our leaders in the political dialogue. Talk about the petition that you've pulled together.
It's a petition we're putting on to change.org. We thought to raise awareness that we would put a petition out there that basically says it requires our Congress to work together across party lines, not recommending, but actually requiring them. And so the thought there was that our goal is to get 100,000 signatures on that petition. We just started it. It's about a few days ago, but our goal is to get to 100,000 on the petition. And the idea is that we're actually going to get people to listen. Once it gets to that level, 50,000 to 100,000 signatures, people start to listen, they take note, and people start to consider, well, what if is that possible? You can actually mandate Congress, specifically here in the House is what we're talking about, for them to actually co-sponsor bills once a session. And so someone on the Republican side would have to go work with some either independent or Democrat to co-sponsor a bill. Now, whether it gets to the floor for vote is a whole other issue, but at least this would require Congress people, the representatives in the House, to have a conversation. And they would actually sit down, just like we talked about, and we're advocating, that they'll sit down and talk about what's common between us. I live in Tennessee and the other person lives in Missouri. What things are we both facing? What are our people, our constituents facing that we can address together? It doesn't have to be a Republican or Democrat issue, but let's figure out a bill that would make sense for both of our states or our districts. That's all we're asking them to do. And co-sponsor the bill, author the bill, present it to be put out to the floor to be voted on. Now, most of those bills don't make it to the floor, as we know. But I think it's symbolic for our representatives to have a conversation. And if everyone's required to do it, that stigma attached to, hey, I'm a Republican, I don't talk to Democrats about anything. Well, if they actually had to do that, they had to actually get to know each other, I think it would just be better for everyone.
Yeah, ultimately, that petition and the other activities that we're engaged in right now are to help start letting people know that we exist as an organization, that we, a Common America, exists, to help them understand the fact that we want people to re-engage in the political discussion. And so through the website that we've pulled together and will continue to add more content to the social media engagement that we're doing now, we've just recently launched a video to help tell that story as well, so that people will find parts of these assets that will resonate with their perspective. We want people to see themselves in this dialogue, to see themselves as having a voice in the political process. So we really encourage you to, go to the website that we have. Our website is www.acommonamerica.org. At our website, you can see the video that I just mentioned. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can start receiving information as we put it out there. Please send your comments and questions in. If you have a little bit of extra in your paycheck this month, make a donation. We will make good use of that donation. We will put that to good use to engage in the political discourse and to eventually support candidates that are going to take a bipartisan approach and commit to making this effort that is just not occurring in our process today. And that's true at both ends of the spectrum. We're certainly not focused on any one political party in this. We believe that there are extremes across the spectrum. What we want to do is re-engage with the middle part of the country, the middle part of the political spectrum that honestly is the majority. We hear from one side or the other. The extremes of that perspective are very small in numbers, but loud in voice. The middle part of the political spectrum is very large in numbers, but very small in their representation in our process today.
Pushing for engagement of that moderate voice is what we're really after. I've talked to hundreds of people And many of them just, as again, they shrug their shoulders and they walk away because there's nothing they can do. And we're saying there is. There's many things you can do, as GM just listed. We encourage you again to have a conversation, spread the word, talk to people about what we're trying to accomplish, tell them to come and join, opt into email. We'll update people on what we're doing. We have a couple of things that are happening soon. We're starting a candidate report card. We're actually trying to remove certain candidates that we feel are not participating in the discourse that actually results in legislation being accomplished, or we're going to support candidates who are running against them in their districts. So we're looking forward to doing that. We'll give more information on that in our next episode. But for now, spread the word, feel empowered. And as we ask politicians to cross the aisle, we ask for you to cross the street and have a conversation with your neighbor and make it respectful, be empathetic, and see how much progress you can make.
And today I wanted to leave everyone with the audio from a video that we just produced. It's our launch video in a lot of ways. This will give you a taste of the issues we're trying to connect with, and it's available on our website. We would encourage everyone to go there, subscribe to A Common America on our website. And in our future podcasts, we look forward to bringing some of these issues to this dialogue and bringing experts and having a conversation so that we can identify the pieces of the solution so that our leaders can become aware of how the moderate voice feels about these issues and can take action on them. Thank you so much for joining us this week on A Common America. And we look forward to talking to you in future weeks. And I'm going to leave you with our launch story.
When you see the news and you see how people are acting in one direction or the other, you end up feeling kind of alone or helpless. Who's out there fighting for people that feel like myself? A Common America is actually taking a step to try to change that.
What I would like to see for me and my family in America would be, I think overall, a safer America.
I don't want to have to be scared of violence amongst peers. There's been a lot of that lately.
I really fear for the future of the country. If I look at the last few years, the rhetoric that we're hearing, I worry about my family and the people around me.
The closest thing right now I have to children are my 3 nieces, and they're biracial. I just think that they're the most beautiful, perfect little humans in the world. The thought of anyone not making them feel like they deserve the world, it kills me. I can't imagine when I have children if this is what I like. Oh my gosh.
That sucks.
Yeah. Having an elected official that has some form of empathy for both parties would be phenomenal.
I think the right candidate would be someone that has earned the respect of people by being an empathetic, good person.
Respect is one of the cornerstones of every democracy, and I think it's getting lost these days.
There's a lot of topics that I do feel very strongly about, but I can also see where we all kind of want the same thing, just differently.
I want to see a better future. I believe that that is possible. If I didn't think that a better future was possible, I wouldn't be working with A Common America, but I do believe that better future is possible.
With A Common America, it's kind of our core theme to bring empathy back so that we can actually bring that moderate voting bloc to make changes in government.
It's really important to hear people, even if I disagree.
It's asinine to be able to assume that I know what somebody else is thinking, or frankly, what somebody else wants without having a conversation.
We're all living this life for the very first time. We're not all gonna be the same. We're not all gonna have the same beliefs.
If we could cut through all of the divisiveness, there's so much more that we have in common.
So if you're like me and you've kind of been sitting back for the last few years and hearing the two sides battle it out and feeling like there's nothing you can do to make a change, know that A Common America is working for these issues. But they can only make progress if people chip in and donate. A Common America will make good use of that to elect officials that will work together for all of us.